For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe.
The other day I noticed a video from the Y-Files called Why Ancient People Didn't See the Color Blue, which currently has 1.7 million views. It claims, as the title suggests, that ancient people did not know about the color blue. And then I saw there were a number of other YouTube channels that made the same claim. Supposedly, the ancients either were not aware of the color, or at the very least, did not have a word for the color. As a teacher of ancient history, I was surprised I had never heard this before. Did I miss something? Is there any truth to these claims? Stick with me, and I will show you what I found. Welcome to the Myths of Ancient History series, in which I point out popular misinformation on YouTube and the internet, and show you how we know it is misinformation. This one is about some claims made by the Y-Files, a popular YouTube channel with more than 1 million subscribers. The Y-Files has a reputation for mixing fact with fiction, but we're going to focus in on one specific claim. I found it very intriguing. I mean, if true, the idea that ancient people didn't know blue is kind of an interesting factoid, isn't it? Let's see what he says.
Here's a philosophical question for you. If a color doesn't have a name, can we still see it? Well, many years ago, the human eye evolved to give us the ability to see about 1 million colors. That's a lot. Then how come, until very recently, nobody saw or even heard of the color blue? Well, it's because blue just didn't exist yet. Let's find out why.
What? Blue didn't exist? Nobody saw or even heard of it. I wanted to find out where the Y-Files got this idea. I couldn't find anything in the scholarly literature. But after doing a little more digging, I found that, although he never cites it, the Y-Files basically is taking his video idea whole cloth from an article by Christopher Hall, published in 2018, titled, Blue is the Rarest Color, Language and Visual Perception. He seems to have accepted the points of this article uncritically. So any errors presented on this subject by the Y-Files appear to be coming from Christopher Hall, an artist from Atlanta. To be fair, the Y-Files isn't the only one who ran with Hall's article. A bunch of other people did as well.
Blue is a mysterious color. To people of the ancient world, like the Greeks, blue wasn't a color at all.
After I started writing the script for this video, I thought to myself, this sounds like a video topic Metatron may have tackled. So I checked, and he absolutely did make a video on it called That the Greeks Couldn't See Blue, Debunked Once and For All, which you should check out. And you can find out more about the Greek color palette in an earlier video, Did the Ancient Greeks Really Not See the Color Blue, by the historian's Craft. I will link those videos below. Both of these videos, however, center attention on whether the color blue existed in the ancient world, and focus on the Greeks. What I'm going to center my attention on is whether blue had a name in ancient times. Evidence is clear that blue was seen, that it was used in art, but did people refer to the color blue? The Y-Files says it didn't have a name. He may not be right about the existence of blue, but maybe he's right about this.
This weird story starts with William Gladstone, a 4-time Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he was a huge fan of Homer.
The Simpsons.
No, not that Homer, Greek Homer.
Oh.
Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and these two epic poems are considered the foundation of all ancient Greek literature, and much of modern literature is, in some ways, derivative of Homer. So Gladstone was reading the Odyssey and noticed Homer described the wine-dark sea, not blue, not green, wine dark. And this description got Gladstone interested in other ways Homer used color to describe things. Homer describes honey as being green and sheep as being violet colored. Gladstone wondered if Homer was colorblind and saw blue as maybe something else.
William Gladstone did, in fact, do a 3-volume study of Homer called Studies on Homer and the Homeric Age. And in Volume 3, there is a section on Homer's perceptions and use of color. Gladstone found a distinct absence of references to the color blue. But although some people, even at the time, thought that Gladstone was supposing that the ancient Greeks were colorblind, he never made such a claim. For some reason, this is a popular misunderstanding of his study.
So he went through thousands of pages of Homer's writing and counted his references to color. Black is mentioned almost 200 times, white about 100 times, red is mentioned 13 times, yellow and green fewer than 10 times, but blue? 0. So Gladstone looked through other ancient Greek writing. Nothing was ever described as being blue. And Gladstone's initial thought was maybe the Greeks saw color differently than other people.
What Gladstone argued was that, quote, the organ of color and its impressions were but partially developed among the Greeks of the heroic age, unquote. And, quote, heroic Greece may probably have been far behind some countries of the East in the use and in the idea of color, which has always had a privileged home there, unquote. This is a reference not to ability of sight, but to concepts. And notice that he clearly acknowledges that in the East, people had the concept of blue. As for his claim about Greece, I'll take you through the evidence.
So researchers analyzed ancient texts from all over the world. The Quran, the Hebrew Bible, ancient Chinese, Hindu, Icelandic. No blue, not once. These ancient texts reference colors with pretty much the same proportion as Homer's epics. Black and white appear a lot, red a few times, yellow and green appear very little, but blue never appears at all.
Who the researchers were that analyzed ancient texts from all over the world and found blue mentioned not even once, he doesn't say. But I can tell you that whoever they were, if they exist, they didn't look very hard. We know that blue existed in ancient art. Logically, all pigments used in art would have had a name. After all, artists and their patrons needed to keep the colors straight in their heads so that they could communicate what should be applied to a surface. Now that alone should tell you that they must have had a name for it. And even a small amount of research will turn up evidence that they did. The ancient people did not usually use generic color terms, such as we do, to refer to their colors. It was far more common to name a color after a natural material, such as how we named the color gold after the metal gold, or how we named the color orange after the fruit. So for example, in the ancient Near East, blue was named after a blue metamorphic rock called lapis lazuli. This shows up in many of the ancient languages. In Akkadian, they called blue uknu. In Ugaritic, iknu. In Hittite, kuano. In Egyptian, chesped, all meaning lapis lazuli. This despite the fact that actual lapis lazuli was not commonly used to make blue paint and dyes. We have specific references in Akkadian and Egyptian of blue glass being called lapis lazuli, referring to the color, not the stone. The Y-File says it isn't in the Hebrew Bible. He is wrong. The Hebrew word sapir, meaning lapis lazuli, often translated sapphire, is used to refer to color, such as when a throne is described as blue in Ezekiel 1:26. Also, there's another Hebrew word for blue, tekelet, which is used numerous times to refer to a blue dye used for clothing in the book of Exodus. He says blue isn't found in ancient Hindu texts, and yet it is. It's just that the Sanskrit word for blue, nila, which literally means dark color, includes all shades of blue down to black. And in ancient Chinese texts, the word qing includes blues and greens. If you look at a color wheel, you must remember that various cultures of the world will divide the colors up as they see fit. And this is where I have to give credit to the Y-Files, because his main point for saying any of this is to show that color names are a cultural construct. The colors all exist, and we all know about them, but the way we divide them up is entirely our choice. At the same time, it is inaccurate to say that certain ancient cultures didn't see blue or didn't have a word for blue. They all did.
Blue finally emerges as its own color when the Egyptians invented a way to produce a blue dye. Suddenly, the light black sky was blue. The Nile River, green for thousands of years, finally became blue. As Egyptian blue dye made its way around the ancient world, languages evolved to accommodate this new color. But before that, nothing. So unless you have a word to describe a color, it becomes really difficult for humans to perceive it.
The Y-Files first showed us that Homer didn't have a word for blue, and then says the Egyptians invented a blue dye, and after that, people started talking about blue. He doesn't seem to realize that Homer lived a long time after the Egyptians started coloring things blue. We are fortunate to have a number of inscriptions from ancient Egypt that tell us about their pigments and how they were made. The Egyptian blue that the Y-Files is talking about, and it is more accurately referred to as a pigment than a dye, was developed before the first dynasty. That's before 3000 BCE. Keep in mind that Homer's works are from after 700 BCE, so more than 2,000 years later. As I mentioned before, the word that the Egyptians used for blue was chesped, but their pigment they usually called chesped irit, lapis lazuli from the kiln. In other words, artificial lapis lazuli. And the Mesopotamians, who purchased this pigment, called it uknu merku, molded lapis lazuli. But what about the Greeks? Why is blue not in Homer? A number of possible explanations have been given for this. One, and this appears to be the most common, is that we are simply looking at poetry, and the way the poet wants to describe things is entirely up to him. Yeah, Homer refers to the wine-dark sea, but how literally should we take this? It may be a metaphor intended to invoke the fact that the sea is dangerous, and many men have died in it, linking wine color with blood. Another explanation is that maybe the Greeks had a wine that was bluer in color. The French make a blue wine today. Some think maybe the water used by the Greeks to dilute their wine was high in alkaline and caused the wine to turn from red to blue. Another proposal is that Homer was referring to red tide. Those who live in Florida, like me, know that this refers to large concentrations of algae that turn the color of the sea red at certain times of the year. Christopher Hall, from whom the Y-Files got his information, rejects these proposals, saying, "All of these potential explanations fail to account for one very important thing, however, the absence of the word blue in ancient Greek literature. The Greek islands are practically surrounded by the color blue, blue sky, blue sea, and yet the word for blue is conspicuously absent." Is that true? The color blue is not merely absent from Homer, it's absent from all ancient Greek literature? Fortunately, we have a great deal more information about colors in ancient Greece and Rome, and more specifically pigments used in their palette, than on the cultures we've already gone over. This is because we have 4 ancient writers whose extant books speak extensively about the names of the pigments: Theophrastus, Vitruvius, Pliny the Elder, and Dioscorides. And we find out that the Greeks and Romans had many names for colors, sometimes even more than one name for the same color. The Greek word for color was chroma, and the Latin word was pigmentum. Now, way back in the Mycenaean period in Greece, this is hundreds of years before Homer, we know from their tablets that they had a cobalt blue glass, which they called kuano. You may remember from earlier, the Hittite name for blue was kuano, and this was also the Hittite word for lapis lazuli. This seems to indicate that the Mycenaean Greeks used the name for lapis lazuli also for their cobalt blue glass. And I should add that ingots of this glass were found in the Uluburun shipwreck from the 14th century BCE, Mycenaean times, along with other materials from around the eastern Mediterranean. In time, the word kuano evolved into kuanos. In the times after Homer, the word referred to anything in the blue to black spectrum, but it should be kept in mind that it originally meant blue and referred to the color of lapis lazuli. The Latin term caeruleum comes from kuanos and means the same thing. In order to differentiate between the various shades of kuanos, or caeruleum, they would employ adjectives along with it, or you would just have to figure it out from the context. Much of the time, they differentiated the blues by their provenance, so they would refer to Egyptian blue, Scythian blue, and Cypriot blue. Cypriot blue, caeruleum cyprium, was a pigment made from azurite, a blue copper ore they would grind up. Scythian blue was made from lazurite, the mineral taken from lapis lazuli and ground up. Lapis lazuli came from Afghanistan, so why did they call it Scythian? Well, it is thought that maybe it was brought to the Mediterranean region by Scythian traders. Egyptian blue was produced by mixing silica, lime, copper, and an alkali. It is the earliest known synthetic pigment, and it came in several forms. There was the standard Egyptian blue, which was called Vestorian blue, Puteolan blue, which Pliny says was also known as Kyanon, cyan, and there was one called Lomentum, which came in a paste and was made by washing and grinding the blue. There were also indigos and purples in the Greco-Roman world. In other words, there was a whole host of colors and plenty of blue. The Y-File's main point for making this video was to show how colors are culturally constructed, and that is a valid point. He just didn't bother to research much beyond the article by Christopher Hall and concluded that blue didn't have a name and that nobody saw or heard it for a long time. As a result, this misinformation spread all over the internet. I doubt this video will get nearly as many views as his. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like what this channel is doing and want to support it, you can do that with a super thanks. Or, if you want to support it on a regular basis, consider doing so over at patreon.com/World of Antiquity. Thank you for watching.
You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word, so feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.